Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, my about two-thirds of my Lion Rampant commission from Blue Table Painting is here. So we've been playing some Lion Rampant games, and I wanted to record my very first battle report. So in the future, I want to do a lot more Lion Rampant content, including some live games potentially, which I think would be fun. But otherwise, I do want to do some battle reports. This is just going to be a solo battle report with just me, but maybe some of my friends will be interested in doing that as well in the future. But let's get right to it. I created two 24-point warbands. On this side, on the southern edge, we have the Summer Storm. This is led by Sadie Strongbow. So Strongbow is her leadership ability. There she is in the center of this unit of crossbow. So Strongbow gives her unit auto pass to shoot. I feel like that's a fantastic thing because in order to give crossbow a shoot activation, that is a 7 plus. So not the easiest thing to roll. So they are going to get to shoot for sure. Now, we also gave the crossbows Pavizis. I don't have any models in there to kind of identify those, but that is a special rule I'm going to have to keep in mind. Flanked on either side of her are two units of light infantry with javelins. So light infantry are better at defending than attacking. So if, a unit has 6-inch move and they're trying to get in our light infantry's face, come and get it because our javelins can shoot within 6. And then if you do manage to get to us, well, we prefer defending anyway. And then we have a glorious unit of elite infantry with a special character that I'm just kind of signifying with a banner right here. These elite infantry with the banner, no other special abilities there. And then with our last 2 points, we chose 2 units of levy infantry. Kind of a thematic reason for that because I kind of see Sadie as a leader of the rebellion. So she has the people on her side here as they are moving. Either we haven't rolled to see who's attacker, who's defender yet. So she's either coming in to maybe try to reclaim this village from this tyrant on the other side, or maybe she's defending the village from the tyrant on this side. And who is this brash individual on this side of the battlefield? Why, it's Baron Thaddeus Brownhill, of course, with his brown nosers. Oh my gosh. Here he is, Baron Thaddeus Brownhill. Now, as regal as he may look atop his steed with bow, he's actually an insipid weakling. So, I'm trying to take advantage of some of the leadership skills that actually give you back points for being included in your warband. Insipid means no +1 courage to other units within 12 inches of him. He doesn't inspire them at all. He's this insipid weakling. And the weakling ability is -1 attack dice or -1 die when you are attacking or shooting, which he potentially may be doing both. But here he is in his unit I've named the Hit and Run. They are actually a unit of light cavalry and they are upgraded to veterans. So they don't actually, and we'll get into all of this later, but when you skirmish normally, it is you hit on 6s. In this case, he'll still hit on 5s and 6s because he's hit and run. I want him to be somewhat effective. And again, he doesn't give a courage boost to those around him. So I can hopefully kind of dance around the battlefield with this super fast light cav skirmishing unit, not getting hit ourselves and skirmish hitting on 5s and 6s with effectively what that means is an 18-inch range to do that because you skirmish at half move. Their move is 12, so 6, and their range is 12. So you can shoot 12 and move 6, and you can move before or after you shoot with that skirmish ability. So that's what he's hoping, Baron Thaddeus Brownhill. But we've also taken 2 units of just standard heavy cavalry. So there's one here, and on bookended the battlefield, there's another one there. Next are 2 units of warrior infantry. So I've only played 2 games of this so far. One solo game by myself, and then one three-way game with 2 of my friends. And in none of those games have I managed to get a chance to use warrior infantry, but I'm fascinated by them because they hit on 3+, like elite cav or elite infantry do. But they are fairly brittle. In defense, they only have a defense of 6, so they want to be the aggressors. They don't want to be charged. They do have countercharge versus infantry, though, which is fantastic. They have wild charge themselves, so we're hoping to line them up against someone and get some attacks off with them. And they also are only armor 2. I didn't give them the bonus to bump them to armor 3, so again, they're fairly fragile. But we do have special characters in both units. In this unit of warrior infantry, we have Brother Sebastian. And Brother Sebastian, with his liquid courage, is going to give them a +1 to their courage rolls. And that's also, I don't think I mentioned what the banner does to that elite infantry unit. But then over here in this other warrior infantry unit, we attached the Taskmaster. She is also going to be providing her own brand of motivation. So both of these units, even though they're only armor 2, and they're probably going to be taking a bunch of casualties, hoping that courage boost will keep those warrior infantry in the fight. And then last but not least, we have kind of like what Sadie over there has done. We have a unit of light infantry with javelins. Light infantry are pretty fast. They're 8 inches. And then with that javelin, they can get into a spot and then maybe get a shot off before being charged. And again, light infantry want to be charged. All right, so that is the whole introduction. And then let's go ahead and roll now. We're going to grab a red die for Sadie. We're going to grab a white die for the cowardly Baron Thaddeus Brownhill. Higher roll is the attacker and goes first. And it is Sadie. All right, so Sadie's trying to reclaim this village in the name of the people, in the name of the revolution. So can she do it? Well, we're about to find out. We will be back at the end of Sadie's turn 1. All right, folks, very quick turn 1, obviously, as these first few turns are going to be. We activated everyone, so I do also want to say now we're playing by all the original 2nd edition rules without any of the optional variants, which means if we fail an activation, it is over. Turn ends immediately. You still get the reroll if you're within 12 of your commander, but apart from that, 1 reroll per turn, that is it. But that said, all of Sadie's Summer Storm were able to activate. Everyone just moved up. We wanted to make sure we prioritize Sadie first, to give her the reroll to move if she needed it to get them up there, because they have an 18-inch range. So we want to take advantage of that and get them in this prime kind of square of the village here. But also, we want them flanked by the light infantry, again, because they have a 6-inch range with their javelins, but also they want to take attacks as well. This unit doesn't necessarily like being in rough terrain because their defense is better anyways. Some units, even if they have poor defense, you get them in rough terrain, it evens the playing field as long as the opposing unit isn't flexible. In this case, our light infantry are actually worse off if they are in rough terrain and taking an attack than they would be if they weren't. But, that's them specifically. If they were being attacked by a harsher unit, that harsher unit would get reduced as well. So it's not the worst, but I wanted to keep them flanking her, so I didn't want them. And we're still playing by the 3-inch rule as well. That's also what I wanted to mention. So we are going to try to adhere to the 3-inch gap between all units at all times during movement, etc. So it was either go through the woods or get them too far away from Sadie, and I want to leave them there. Elite infantry were also a huge priority, so they're moving here. They're flexible though, so if someone tries to tangle with them in the river in this rough terrain, they're fine with that, but they are slower. They're not fast in rough terrain, so they're kind of skirting the edge of the river right now. And then the only other thing that can kind of help the elite infantry out in case, there's a lot of stuff over there. We want to kind of use these levy to draw in some of that. Same thing on this side, though not as big. So this was the last unit that we activated, and again, everyone passed. But to move all these guys was pretty easy. It was 5s and 6s across the board. So we got it without even needing the reroll. All right, it's Baron Thaddeus's turn. All right, and Baron Brownhill has activated his side. Everyone also was successfully activated, and I realized that their army is actually very fast because obviously we have the light cavalry with movement 12, the heavy cav at 10, and both the warrior infantry and the light infantry are both movement 8. So they're pretty quick. Now, these warrior infantry don't like being in rough terrain because while they are flexible, they do well. I'm gonna have to take a peek at that because one of the things is their defense is 6, but I think when I looked at the rules for flexible, it said for the warrior infantry that in rough terrain they're still defense 6. So they really do not want to be in rough terrain whatsoever. So they want to get across this river really fast. So they're almost there. Hopefully they don't. Are they still within 12 of the Baron? That is my next question. Yes, just barely are they in 12 of the Baron, so they can potentially get a reroll if they don't. Not that they're in any real concern of being engaged at this point in the river, but I just thought that was somewhat interesting. I'm going to take a look at that and I'll be back. Yeah, that was the verbiage I was thinking of. So normally in rough terrain, you are defense value 5, armor 2. In this case, they're flexible, so all of their values remain the same, and that's not a good thing for their defense value. So their defense is still going to be hitting on 6s in rough terrain. So yeah, warrior infantry aren't the biggest fans of being in rough terrain. But either way, we got everyone moved up. We have the light infantry moving across the bridge, warrior infantry almost across the hill. These 2 units of cavalry trying to swing around there, but thankfully blocked currently from shots from those deadly crossbows. I cannot wait to get some volleys off with those. Don't tell the Baron I said that. All right, we'll be back after Sadie's turn 2. All right, shorter turn for Sadie because we had a failure. We did start with Sadie to get her up into this central position. She now has 18-inch range, basically across the whole situation here, which is fantastic. That's probably about as far up as she's going to move. Light infantry passed on this side to kind of protect the flank from what's happening over here. They are 12 inches away from both the heavy and the light cav, so there is an opportunity here for the Baron to skirmish potentially to hit them, but we'll see if he's able to get that kind of an activation off next turn. Sadly, the peasants didn't even get a chance to activate, nor did these levy infantry, because our elites did fail. So the elites failed. They're taking a little break by the river. This unit of light infantry, prior to that elite infantry failure, did pass, and then they moved a little bit further up into the woods. That's okay. No big rush over here because the real fast units are on that side and then way over there. So by the time these guys get up into this area, they should be out of the woods and ready to go. Also, we positioned them a little to the left of where, they were heading straight up, just so Sadie can have a clear line of sight there. Whenever someone does decide to arrive on that side. All right, back after the Baron's turn. All right, we have our first casualties, but first, The Baron was also able to get off 3 activations before these heavy cav way over here did fail to move. So the warrior infantry, these light infantry, they failed. These warrior infantry succeeded, so they have managed to cross the river there, and we tested them first. They did use the Baron's reroll before the Baron had moved because they were just within that 12-inch range. And then we had the Baron skirmish. They figure they are going to get a cover bonus from shots from Sadie over here. And they thought this was too juicy of a target to pass up. They passed shots into the light infantry, causing 3 casualties. They passed their courage test, so they are still standing. And then heavy cav charged over here. They are just out of 18 inches there. They are well beyond the 6-inch javelin range there, but they're within 10 inches for a charge there. So that is the way that's looking. And now back to Sadie for turn 3. I'm not finished with the turn yet, but I just want you to take a look at this attack roll. Oh my gosh. This is karma, because what I had forgotten was the Baron's weakling leadership skill, if you want to call it that. They should have only rolled 11 dice when they shot instead of 12. So I was like, do I put a casualty back? Because he got exactly 6 hits. But I left it there. And then Sadie just did all the work. So also we were saying, because I'm like, do I count the template part of this as cover or just the edge of the building? Because if you think about it, the majority, like the cover rules say, the majority of the shooting unit versus the majority of the receiving unit. In this case, I would argue that the majority of both the shooting and receiving unit are not within cover. The leader's base edge may be partially back there, so it'd be like half and half potentially, but at the same time, like the rules say, if it's that close, just assume cover, because, like these guys. And also, I probably moved them up a little bit further than I had to get a 12-inch shot off, as you can see. So they could have been another couple inches back there. So I also let that go. But it looks like it's not going to end up mattering a whole lot. Now, what cover does is increases their armor by 1. Like Cav, we're actually already armor 3, which is pretty darn good. Cover gives them armor 4. And also, because crossbows were shooting at longer than 12, they normally hit on 4-ups, they were hitting on 5s and 6s. But it doesn't look like that mattered a whole lot to Sadie, because we have 2 hits here, so that's exciting. We're going to test for, lucky blow on the Baron and courage test and so much more. We'll be back. All right, we're starting to have some fun now. This is very exciting. So, yeah, the Baron's unit's not there anymore. You notice they tiptoed back, though a half move for them is still a full move for most others. So they rolled poorly. They rolled a 6, minus 2 is a 4. Their courage is 5. And don't forget, the Baron is insipid. His troops don't respect him. He doesn't grant the +1 courage for his unit or any other nearby units. So they failed, and they are battered, as you can see there, and they fell back. All right. However, what else happened? So once that shooting was done, we had the light infantry move a little bit further out of the woods, trying to keep, again, that 3-inch gap there. Elite infantry, pass. They're moving up. They wouldn't mind. They're flexible as well, though they would definitely prefer to attack versus defend. But their defense value is pretty nice. It would still be better than the warrior infantry if they could coax them into that field there, or potentially those cav. Either way. But the peasants over here also move, so they have a little bit of support over there. Levy infantry over here failed, and that ended the turn. We didn't even try to move these guys. they're ready to accept the charge here because they really want that cav over here, so we have another target to take shots at. But seeing those last light infantry fail, the levy infantry must have been like, we're going to stay up on the hill for right now. All right, and then it is over to Baron's turn 3. Oh, the Baron, ever since he got those shots off, it's been downhill for him. He failed his rally. Maybe don't make the commander of your warband an insipid weakling. That may be the idea here, because yes, they failed to rally, so as per the rules they lost another figure, and in the cavalry scheme of things you can only lose 2 figures before losing a third makes you half strength. So they retreated another 6. If they fail next turn, they're potentially off the board. I haven't measured it, but it looks like that's going to be the case. Though losing a Baron who doesn't actually inspire anyone around him is not the worst thing, but the entire army will have to take a courage test. So that's going to be scary. And then, as if on cue, we figured, well, this is the only unit within 12 of the Baron. Let's use the reroll if we need it. Warrior infantry tried to move on a 6, failed. Use the reroll, failed. Turn over. So nothing moved on the Baron side except for old Thaddeus himself in retreat after getting a couple bolts to the horses over here. All right, we're back to Sadie. All right, Sadie was a complete success, though, with everyone on the Baron side not being able to do anything. It's tough to try to figure out how to react, but not get too far ahead. So here's what we ended up doing. So we left Sadie alone. She is just out of 18 here. She doesn't want to get too far up here. These light infantry succeeded. They're out of the woods. Outside of 3, they're good there. These guys actually decided to move outside of their 10. So they readjusted and reformed here. So that is not going to be able to be a charge, at least not on the Baron's next turn. These peasants actually moved back. They figured if they were there, one of 2 things is going to happen. They could stay there, or they could move up. And moving up is a concern, because then that cavalry could engage them. And again, if they get pushed back, then the cav could have an angle on these light infantry, which is still somewhat of a concern. But if they were up here and, the cav came at them from an angle, they have to retreat directly away from an enemy, and they can't, again, retreat through another unit without maybe losing additional figures or something like that. It's just an interesting situation where you don't want to be flanked and have this kind of chain reaction thing happening. So they decide to move back. If you want to, and also with the cav being there, you can't shoot through friendly units either. So that's going to be something we're actually going to consider, maybe even moving them back a little bit more too. But if you want to come after the easy pickings over here, come and do that, but then we will have easy shots at you. I mean, if we lose this 1-point unit because they run off the table, but get some successful shots off on you, that's exactly what we kind of want. So that's kind of the thought here. And we have a couple turns to do that, because like I said, they can't get a charge in here, so we're going to see where they move potentially, and then readjust ourselves accordingly. The elite infantry succeeded. They moved up and starting to move up into this field here. And the peasants also moved up. Someone smarter than me would have to devise what the best way to go about doing this is, but they are still out of charge range there. It's going to be an interesting situation what we decide to do with them. If we're going to try to lure them with the peasants and then try to back away so the elite can attack, because again, the elite would prefer to attack. They have an attack of 3+, defense of 4. Now, in the rough terrain, they are still flexible. They would get these values. Everyone else, though, is going to be attack value 5. So even if they're defending in the rough terrain, they're still on 4s, and armor 4, whereas the rest are going to be armor 2, attack value 5. So they kind of like it in the rough terrain, though they're not fast, so they're not very swift in the rough terrain. But we'll see what ends up happening there. If the Baron can actually do anything, we'll be back. All right, folks, the moral of the story is if your leader is an insipid weakling, do not attach him to a unit of light cav that has courage 5 plus and half of a movement for them is 6 inches. Because in 2 bounding retreats, they failed their rally and moved off the table. Now, the funny thing about that is, first off, the courage test among the entire army, everyone passed. Not only that, some of the units passed with boxcars. They rolled 12, 2 sixes on 2d6. They were almost elated that their cowardly leader fled the battlefield, evidently. And it's not like it was a. And here's the other thing. Well, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter. I was going to say, once the leader's off the table, their leadership skills also no longer apply. In this case, they weren't giving a courage bonus anyways, so that there's no loss there. That light cavalry unit, because of the -4 leadership skill points, that unit was only a 2-point unit, so it's not like it was a huge chunk of the army. Do I wish that they would have done more than 3 casualties on a light infantry unit? Yes, of course. I had grand dreams of them skirting along the back of the enemy, taking shots, skirmishing, or even just moving up, hitting, moving back, moving up, hitting, moving back. That didn't happen. Oh my gosh. Yeah, courage 5 with no courage bonus. And when you retreat, if you must, it's 6 inches each time. In a cavalry unit where you're half strength after losing 3 of your 6 figures, that was probably the worst tactical mistake of all time. Anyways, who did move? Well, we did fail with these warrior infantry, so they stayed. We didn't get to try them or these heavy cav, but these heavy cav said, sure, why not? Now that the elites are in the field, they're moving at half speed. Their speed's only 6. It's going to take them a while to get out of that sludge. So they can possibly take on them, and then who knows what their possibilities are at that point. And then the warrior infantry, they also kind of said the same thing. They're like, you're kind of stuck in the mud over there, dudes. So they have schemes of potentially moving across. Well, we'll see. Because again, they don't want to be stuck in the river, but they also don't want to be stuck in the field fighting those elite infantry. So we'll see what ends up happening over here. It's almost a comedy of errors, but it is back over to Sadie. All right, we made a bit of a mistake with Sadie as well. I should have tried something over here. This doesn't necessarily matter because what I probably should have done with the peasants was attack with them because they have the same attack or defense value, but the heavy cav prefer to attack. So if we would have got them on the defense, they would have been on 5s. Now they're on 4s. So it's a 50-50 shot on 12 dice. And Levy is armor 1, so they could be wiped out here while the elites are still stuck in the mud. What we did pass was these light infantry moved back, so there's no fear of them swinging around the side. Sadie's unit actually moved up just slightly, so if that heavy cav continue to sit there, they're now within range. Sadie is going to get shots off on that heavy cav. These light infantry are in a good place. They stayed. Our mistake was, instead of doing anything with those guys, we tried to move these levy and we failed, and they're outside of 12, so that was that. Over to the Baron. This is nuts. And see, these are the kind of things you wouldn't get if you play by alternative rules with the the everyone gets one test to activate. Like, I understand that failures can be frustrating, but I feel the spirit of the rules and just the situations you get in are insane if you just play by the actual rules. So, case in point, heavy cav, you know what? The heavy cav said, we can't just sit here. We're going to get shot at. If we continue to retreat, what's even the point then? Let's get this party going. They're charging in. They understand they're going to take a volley. I didn't actually even measure this. Are they now within 10? Yeah. So Sadie's going to get shots off, but then these heavy cavalry are pouring in. So, I mean, that's what you got to do, I feel like. But and then I was like, okay, well then over here, these heavy cav, these are levy. They failed their 5+ attack roll. Is that not absolutely nuts? And I also just realized they are a little bit too close from that last move, because don't forget, you can't get within 3. Not that that actually really mattered a whole lot here, but just making sure everything is kosher. But they failed. The heavy cavalry, you'd think they'd be licking their chops to dive into those levy infantry. Oh my gosh, that would have been a slaughter. They'd be able to move around. Who knows what they'd be able to do? They failed. And that was the second thing that this army even attempted. So no one else got to do anything. And now it's time for Sadie to get her shots off over here. Oh my gosh, folks, it is insane. Okay, fascinating, fascinating stuff. Sadie got shots off, managed to pick off 2 heavy cav. Now that is obviously a complete miss would be what the heavy cav wanted, but that was the worst they could take. But still get a full charge off with not being half strength. They pass their courage test, they're fine. But then I was trying to think like a general here. I didn't want them to just charge in and then, my light cav or my light infantry react. And actually, I keep forgetting they actually have javelins. But here's the other thing, but I was like, all right, I could actually position them in such a way that the heavy cav cannot even reach the crossbowmen. And again, that is something you can't do in like where they're set up here if you don't follow the 3-inch gap rule, because now there is no way you'd be within 3 inches here of no matter who, even if you try to go single file through here, you'd be within 3 inches of somebody. This is an example in the rule book, actually. It shows the ranged unit being protected by 2 other units. So now if they want to attack, it's going to be one of these other 2 units. Don't forget, they do have Wall of Spears. Should they fail, I'm putting them in Wall of Spears, but more than likely they'll pass and they are going to get their charges off here. But again, light infantry rather be attacked and defend than attack themselves. So we managed to pass with both lights. They moved to where you see them here. And then, yes, we did manage to get the elites. They have moved out of the the swampy field over there into the river now. So they're still, because they figure, what are we even doing over here? The action's over here. Let's just move over here. So that's what they decided to do. They want to be on this side of the river. The levy tried actually to activate. I was not going to have them attack because I figure, why have them attack, likely do nothing, maybe do something, but likely do nothing, and then them have to retreat, potentially fall back battered or whatever the case may be, and allow the cavalry free reign. Let's let them do that on their turn. If they want to charge us, let's have them do that on their turn, waste their action to do that. But I did actually try to move them to see if maybe we could get them, in a position where the cavalry couldn't just ignore them if they decided to do that. But they failed, so they stayed put, and these peasants over here also just stayed put. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I almost feel like we're, that could have been a unit of skirmishers potentially if we saved those 2 points on levy infantry into 1 unit of skirmishers. They could have skirmished here. Now, they would have failed anyways, but this would be a great opportunity to skirmish, shoot 6 inches, fall back, and they'd be shooting on 5-ups and then fall back, a half move, which is 4 inches for skirmishers. Either way, now it is over to see what the Baron does. All right, folks. Again, such an interesting turn. So, this just looked like a slaughterhouse. Even if they charge one of these light infantry units, push them back, they were going to be mincemeat for the crossbows. They did decide to fall back. I honestly hate falling back, but I figured there's going to be a better time. Instead, we actually managed to move up with the warrior infantry. Unless this light infantry moves out of the way, crossbows can't shoot through even friendly figures. So we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But we decided to be aggressive. The light infantry moved across the bridge, warrior infantry up to make up for the cowardice of the heavy cavalry. And maybe now, depending on what ends up happening over here, maybe they can swing around when that gets occupied. Over here, the heavy cavalry did succeed in charging into the levy infantry, and as you assume, they got slaughtered. Levy infantry lost 6 casualties. They're on courage 5. They rolled like a 9, though. So they are still on the battlefield, but they did have to retreat battered. But the bigger news is the Levy infantry actually caused a casualty on the heavy cav. So Levy hits on 6s, and heavy cav is armor 3. And yeah, they actually rolled 3 6s to peel off one of the heavy cav units. This unit of warrior infantry failed their activation, which is why they've stayed put. But now it is back to Sadie and what she wants to do about the situation coming at her over here. All right, folks, here's what we did. Of course, this unit of light infantry was able to activate within 12 just in case we had the reroll if needed. They didn't need it. They moved out of the way. So again, here's the thing. This is always a guaranteed action. She is going to be able to shoot with this unit every single turn because of that leadership ability of anyone actually within 12 inches, her unit included, gets a free auto activation for shooting. So yeah, I mean, that was again 12 dice needing 4 ups on armor 2 warrior infantry. That did 3 casualties to them. Of course, the taskmaster's in there to make sure they don't run. They did pass their courage test. But yeah, they shuffled to the side. Crossbows got 3 casualties off. These light infantry decided to press the advantage. They moved over here. They are now within 6 inches here. So either this cavalry unit is going to continue to run, or it's going to charge, which they would rather be defensive anyways, and then potentially lose that battle, move back, and then have a great line of sight to them. Or they'll fail their activation, and then next turn, these light infantry can shoot them with their javelins. So either way, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens over there, over here potentially. There's a wild charge situation. I didn't even measure. They obviously within 8. So they are going to be charging into this unit because they have that wild charge. And then the elite infantry continue to move, shuffle across the river. The levy infantry rallied. They rolled an 11. -6 casualties is 5. They are courage 5. They rallied. Rallied just in time to probably face the brunt of another cavalry charge. Though I will say, though, now, we forgot to put this on earlier, they are not battered. No, no, no. They are half strength. So they're only going to be rolling 6 dice, still needing trip 6s to even do anything. So will the heavy cav risk it again? We'll see. And then lastly, this unit rolled snake eyes. That unit is just sitting there watching. These are the people, though. These are the people, part of Sadie's, what did I call them? Summer Storm Revolutionaries. So they're watching. They're watching their glorious Sadie do whatever it is she does, which so far is just shoot up the opposition. All right, back over to the Baron. Oh my goodness, the Baron's bad fortune strikes again. If you don't see a unit of warrior infantry here, you're not alone. So what happened was during the wild charge phase, they succeeded in getting the wild charge off, so they charged into the light infantry here. Now, on attack, the warrior infantry is on 3 ups. And armor for the light infantry, because they're not in shield wall, was 2. So 3 ups with armor 2 meant they ended up doing 5 casualties when all was said and done to the light infantry. However, light infantry in defense is on 4 ups, and warrior infantry is also armor 2. So 4 ups armor 2, they managed to do 4 casualties to the warrior infantry. So add that to the 3 casualties from Sadie earlier. They were on courage 4 at -7. And even the taskmaster couldn't keep the courage up, and the warrior infantry rolled like a 5. -7 plus 1 was still in the negative below 0. So they fled. They were gone. The courage, though, for the light infantry was close, even being so close to Sadie. Sadly, I think they ended up, when the calculation was done, with a 3 in their courage 4. So they did retreat. They are battered, but that warrior infantry unit being gone is just such a brutal blow. And then while we were deciding what to do over here, oh, we made a big mistake and tried to charge in with these guys, these heavy cav, to try to wipe out the peasants and feel good about something. But they rolled snake eyes. They rolled snake eyes and are now just sitting here, which means this unit, because of the indecision, is now going to get shot at likely by javelins. So, I mean, oh, that hurt. That hurt quite a bit. Back to Sadie. All right, our light infantry rallied, so they stayed there. Sadie's unit decided to move up a little bit. They were just outside of 18 of those light infantry on the bridge. So they moved up. They are now within 18, so we'll see what happens there. Don't forget that strong bow leadership ability of Sadie's gives any unit, including her own, within 12 inches an auto shoot action. So these light infantry, with their javelins, were able to auto shoot, take advantage of that because they were within 12 of her, and shot javelins hitting on 5s and 6s in groups of 3. They managed to take out 2 more heavy cav. Now, I don't know why I put this battered token on there, because they actually did pass, because they lost 4, their courage is 4, and they rolled an 8 or higher, so they actually were fine. But as you can see, they are now at half strength, so that's gonna be a tough sell. And then I believe it was over here, we tried to move the elite infantry, but they failed. And of course, our levy infantry is still standing there waiting to see what happens over here. But yeah, this has been absolutely insane. Back to the Baron. Wow, a rare full Warband activation by the late Baron. However, you may notice heavy cav are gone, so they decided there's 2 of them left. They're not going to keep running. They decided to charge the light infantry. They managed to do, what was it? 2 casualties, because they were at half strength. So they rolled 6 dice, needing 4 ups. They did 2 casualties, which wasn't too bad. However, light infantry, being within 12 of Sadie, they just barely passed their courage test. However, don't forget, light infantry in defense are also hitting on 4+. Now, they needed triplets, but they managed to get 6 hits, and so the heavy cav are gone. Light infantry moved off the bridge. They understand. They are now in the firing line. They're going to take some hits. Brother Sebastian and the warrior infantry over here crossing the river. Don't forget they're fast, which I keep forgetting. So they move at normal speed through rough terrain like that. And then, yes, finally our heavy cav over here. I mean, how sad is that? That's a 4-point unit of heavy cavalry. They've wasted all this time, lost a casualty, finally took out the levy infantry. And levy infantry didn't do anything back. Of course, they're at half strength, needing triples of 6s, and I think they rolled 1 6. So nothing there, but now it's back over to Sadie, and this is going to be interesting here, because she's going to get a big chunky volley of 4+ on armor 2 spears. So we'll see how this ends up going. Oh, this was about to be cinema. So we only were able to activate 2 things. Obviously, we started with the freebie here. Auto shoot activation, 12 dice, 4 ups in armor 2 light infantry. Sadie managed to take out 4 of them. They failed their courage test. They're backing up battered back to the bridge. Then we realized in measuring that even though the elite infantry are slow in the river, that if they still moved half move, they would have been within 6 inches of these warrior infantry, which means they would have had to test their wild charge. I believe, I'm going to have to look that up if the wild charge would have even still happened in rough terrain. But either way, they sadly failed with Snake Eyes. But I thought that would have been hilarious if we had this little river battle, moving the elite up, triggering the wild charge of the warrior infantry, and then in that rough terrain, warrior infantry would have been attack value. No. Actually, that would, yeah. Never mind. That I am now glad that I failed that. Oh, I read that all wrong. Elite infantry would have loved to attack, be the aggressor against the warrior infantry in rough terrain because they are flexible and would have been hitting on 3 ups. Whereas warrior infantry in defense would have been hitting on 6 ups. And warrior infantry would have only been armor 2, whereas elite infantry armor 4. But if they got the wild charge off, they'd actually been hitting on 3+. And they are, and yeah, because they're flexible as well. So they would have still been hitting on 3. So both of them would have been hitting on 3s, but elites would have been armor 4, whereas warriors would have been armor 2. But Brother Sebastian's in the unit, so he would have given them a little bit of courage. So actually, maybe in retrospect, I'm glad that they may have failed that activation. So they should just continue moving. All right, back to the Baron. All right, quick update for the Baron side. Failed to rally the light infantry. They lost a figure then as they continue to be battered and are now once again retreating up the bridge. Warrior infantry passed a move activation, found out they were like just an inch outside of 8-inch range for their wild charge. They actually would have loved that. So they just shuffled up just a bit. So they're outside of the 6-inch. And actually, I guess they could have moved up. You know, I actually may fix that because they're not fast. The elite infantry are not fast. So they would only be able to attack us within 3 inches. So I am going to now live move them up just outside of 3. That way, wherever the elite infantry go, they may still be within wild charge range of these warrior infantry. Because at the very least, that would be a bit of a morale boost if they were actually able to do something there. But we'll see what ends up happening. And also the heavy cav surged forward 10. They figure as long as that river's there, they're not going to be able to catch them. They may try to do something, but it seems so far nothing's been happening. But so basically the Baron's down to those 2 units essentially because these light infantry obviously aren't doing anything. So all right, back to Sadie. All right, so the Baron's going to have an interesting next turn, actually, because our elite infantry failed to activate, but of course we did our free activation of a shoot action against the remnants of that poor light infantry. They took all that time to cross the bridge and move up. Then they just got shot at and have retreated. They took 2 more casualties because it was long range. So they were only hitting on 5s and 6s. Armor 2, though, there were 4 hits, 2 casualties. But they passed. They rolled boxcars because they were at -7. So 12 minus 7 being 5, their courage is 4. They were fine. Of course, they are still battered, but wow, I thought maybe that would have been it for them. And then, yeah, the elite infantry are going to be wild charged by the warrior infantry, so we'll see how that goes on the Baron's turn. All right, a mixed bag for the Baron first. They did fail to rally the light infantry. In fact, they rolled a 7, of course, with 7 casualties meant a result of 0. That unit has fled the battlefield. Over here, the warrior infantry, and this happened as well. Can't remember which happened first. Rallying the battered unit or the wild charge. Either way, they both, the wild charge was successful. They got in close combat with the elite infantry, rolling 3 ups, needing groups of 4. They actually did get 2 casualties, so that was pretty good. But again, elite infantry were able to also roll really well. Also, oh, let me see. What were elite infantry's defense value? 4 plus. That's right, because they, that's interesting. I think they caused 1 less casualty, because I forgot, they weren't on 3s, they were on 4s. Thank gosh I left the result here. So these 3s didn't count, so they actually only caused 3 casualties, not 4. So let me put 1 guy back. Thankfully, that didn't end up mattering too terribly much, because both units passed their courage test, and however, the warrior infantry suffered more casualties, so they had to retreat, but no one's battered. And then the heavy cav continued to swing over. They're about to cross the river as well. So very interesting development on the Baron side. All right, for Sadie's side, they're gearing up for the arrival of what's happening over here. So light infantry moved down, Sadie moved down kind of in between them. These levy infantry, they're just, they rolled a 5. They're like, yeah, we're done. These elite infantry did manage to move out of the river now. However, they are still within wild charge distance of the warrior infantry. So we're probably going to see a part 2 of that, which is going to be very interesting. But otherwise, we'll see what ends up happening here on the Baron's turn. Okay, not as exciting as probably we may have been expecting, because warrior infantry failed their wild charge, so they did move out of the river. They made sure they were outside of a 6-inch attack range from those individuals, even though warrior infantry do have countercharge against infantry, but that's on a 7-up. So they didn't want to risk it. They wanted to play on their own terms, though I just don't know if the elite infantry is going to honor that request or maybe continue to move out. But assuming maybe they fail their activation for the turn, they are within 8 inches for another wild charge attempt next turn. And then the heavy cav succeeded their activation and are now moving across the river. So back to Sadie. All right, so positioning again this line. Light infantry here moved back, but they're making sure to stay over 4 inches away from the edge of the board, because per the rules, if a figure in a unit is within the retreat distance of a board edge, even if it's not directly away from an opponent, they will prefer the board edge. So with an 8-inch move for light infantry, that means if a figure in a light infantry unit is within 4 inches of a board edge and they retreat, they are off that board edge. So we're sticking them over here a little bit, move that light infantry up. Actually, I can't even remember if I even activated the crossbow unit, but either way, what's funny here is the elite infantry did move, but they kept within 12 inches here, because potentially if they do, or within 8 inches here for the wild charge. So the wild charge is still going to potentially happen. If this unit does have to retreat, it may open up some potential shots here against the warrior infantry, which would be fantastic. And then just for funsies, I tried to roll to activate these levy infantry and failed again. So they are truly done. Back to the Baron. All right, so interesting development here. And actually, the turn's not over yet, but I just wanted to, because nothing really is going to happen here except potentially they'll move. But the wild charge did get off. They charge it. I'm still kind of surprised elite infantry doesn't have countercharge, but I kind of understand they are fully armored. Maybe they don't, and they don't have. They're not very mobile. But, anyways, so they did 2 wounds apiece to each other, 2 casualties rather. So yeah, 3 ups for warrior infantry was not that difficult to get 8 hits, and I think they even got 9. But and then elite infantry, I did remember defense value 4 plus, but warrior infantry being armor 2, yeah, they were able to get a few of those. So 2 casualties, 2 casualties. The elite infantry passed their courage. Warrior infantry, even with Brother Sebastian, did not. However, then I remembered, wait, the special character banner bearer, the special character of Brother Sebastian, they should all be rolling those lucky blows. And as a matter of fact, it was Brother Sebastian fell in battle. And then I also rolled twice since the elite infantry had taken casualties twice and passed both times. So the banner bearer of the elite infantry is still there. Of course, they are back to being half strength. The sadly the warrior infantry again lost that courage roll, so they not only lost Brother Sebastian, but they have retreated battered. So things are not looking so good for them, but we'll get this move off potentially, and then it's back to Sadie. All right, folks, I just did the last couple turns off cam because it was pretty academic at that point. But just to summarize what happened, the heavy cav did move, I believe. And then back over to Sadie's turn, the elite infantry actually charged. They were still within charge range of their own of the warrior infantry. And so at that point, they did another wound to them. They took no damage in return. The warrior infantry retreated battered. The crossbows had over 12-inch range to the heavy cavalry. Though I will say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, obviously, you can't see through up to 3 inches into the woods. However, like this crossbowman on the end here was able to see one of the cavalry units. Now, the majority of the cavalry compared to the majority of the crossbows were obscured, but as long as one crossbow can still see one cav, they can still get shots, right? I believe so. Still gave the cav a cover bonus. They did take another casualty, however, though they passed their courage test. Back on Baron's turn, the warrior infantry failed to rally. They lost another guy and continued to retreat. And then the heavy cav actually failed to move. So back on our turn, I shouldn't say our turn because we're supposed to be unbiased here, but back on Sadie's turn, I believe the elite infantry charged in again, may have done like another casualty or something. Either way, the warrior infantry failed their courage test completely and were just eliminated off the board. And then because we were still within that shot, the crossbows did another wound to the cavalry, and at that point they failed their courage and retreated battered. So all the Baron had left was a half strength batter. Actually, no. What happened was they didn't even retreat back. They forgot the golden rule of the board edge, like we had been working out over here. Half move for them obviously is 5 inches. They were well within 5 inches of the board edge. So when they were battered and retreated, they actually retreated off the board. So it ended up being a total board wipe. So this was a bloodbath scenario where I believe it mentions once you get to 6 units or below 6 units or something like that total on the board, you start rolling a die. And if the die value is greater than the number of units remaining on the battlefield, that's when the game ends. We were getting down there, right? I mean, it's because of units like this peasant levy infantry sticking around. We didn't have to do that roll because there was still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units on the board. So it ended up being a total board wipe even without that. So what did Sadie's unit actually lose? Well, they lost one full unit of levy infantry, and they lost, 2/3 of their elite infantry and a good chunk out of both light infantries, but still not enough to bring either down to half strength. And Sadie's unit didn't lose a single thing. It was always well protected and can shoot really well. Whereas obviously the Baron lost everything. Well, the Baron's fatal flaw was again putting an insipid weakling in a unit of light cavalry who had courage 5, did not get a courage boost to that, and every time they retreat, because they're so fast, they're retreating 6 inches right off the board in a couple turns. So that was that was hilariously bad. Additionally, they had several failed activations, but a lot of those ended up being kind of funny. So kind of thematic that the Baron himself was kind of a coward, and so a lot of his army was as well. Though they did get in some decent shots. I mean, they took apart the elite infantry there. When they were able to get close to the crossbows, they took out some chunks out of the light infantry. But I mean, we can't paint this any other way than to say it was a total colossal failure for the Baron's unit. Baron's Warband had 2 units of warrior infantry, 2 units of heavy cavalry, 1 unit of light, and actually they were veteran light cav, so they could skirmish without the -1 penalty, though, that's what good that did them. They did take a chunk out of some light infantry, I guess. And then their light infantry did nothing. Started here, was excited to use the bridge, moved up, got shot to pieces, backed up, failed to rally, kept getting shot as they continued to back up. It was just an absolute nightmare, but it was so much fun. I love this rule set. I cannot wait to continue playing with probably a better designed warband than that, but I love this idea of a commander in a well-protected crossbow that gives them free shoot activations. Crossbow's so good, hitting on 4-ups, 5-ups if it's over 12 inches, and getting to auto shoot. Normally crossbows can only hit can shoot on a 7+. So getting the free shoot for only a point, yeah, I think that elite crossbow unit is fantastic. And also Pavizis. They had Pavizis. We never even had to use them. Normally crossbow would be armor 2. They'd be armor 4 if you tried shooting them, or even armor 3 if somehow you actually got into their face. So, because how else would you get rid of them, right? Like if you managed to, you're not going to get close to them. You're going to have to shoot them at range, but when you do, they're armor 4. So I mean, it's a lot of points, right? It's a 4-point unit, up to a 6-point unit, up to a 7-point unit when you put the leader with the strongbow trait in there. But a 7-point unit that is so strong that it's just amazing. So yeah, anyways, I just thought that was fantastic. All right, folks, that'll do it. Thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it. And until next time.